Welcome everyone to the Nexus of Learning, our book club for PMI. Today we'll be reviewing the book, The Engagement Blueprint, and later we'll have an interview with the author, Coach Kon. We've got a digital version available that's for free for all members, given to us by Coach Kon. I love this book. It's full of personal observations and stories, but case studies, data points, and really importantly, models. The concept of this book is really focused on how leaders can make their teams more engaged, but I also read it professionally and personally. So today I want to take it from those two angles because, we are leaders. No matter if we have a formal or informal leadership, we are leaders. Only 23% of employees feel truly engaged. Industrialist in America said there's three things you need to measure for success, right? One is employee engagement, customer satisfaction, and cash flow. Those are the KPIs of a business. And I really agree with that. So why aren't we more engaged internally in life in general if we're, parents at home or taking care of others at home or just taking care of ourselves at home, which is like a full-time job for me. You can feel exhausted and mentally distant and reduce your efficacy. I always think, am I being productive? This is how I know I'm having a good day if I'm productive. Or at work, feeling unfairly treated, having an overwhelming workload, or not feeling supported. Maybe the company is refusing to train you, or they're refusing to allow you to do some interesting projects that keep you engaged. All of these things can create this kind of burnout. And I love this note from the author that says, burnout's what happens when you're trying to avoid being human for too long. Challenge is real, as we say, right? Our need to feel valued. We want to feel important in our own universe, our world that we live in. And then to feel connected to others, to feel productive. That's one of my favorite words. So, more than I love you is was I productive today? And then to feel supported, to feel the ability to grow and shape our own futures. We're going to talk about the positive side of these things, but one of the graphics I stole from the book is about these things, about what happens when you don't have these things and not having both clarity in communications, but also clarity in actions and outcomes is one of the ways that this activity can actually create disengagement. So I want to dive into these four areas now. Feeling valued. Why does it matter? It's about showing respect and time and gratitude for the people we're connecting with, helping people feel valued. And I think that kind of goes to the autonomy and purpose, but also the mastery, the idea that when someone else feels like this is their wheelhouse, this is their thing they're good at, letting them feel that is important, I think. And I'm not sure as an early manager back 100 years ago when I was an, first year manager, I'm not always sure I did that. And that's a lesson, I learned over years. And then my quotes here are from the book. And I think that's really nice from the author to kind of underline the concepts with a thought from someone who may never have heard of the concept of engagement. And I have to say, this idea of not only asking people what they thought, but then attending to the answer. Does that resonate? The other comment about value at work is absolutely what the author's getting to. And again, he's doing it much more succinctly and with beautiful models and examples and case studies. And here I'm summarizing it in a very condensed format. So if you're interested, remember, if you go to the book club, I've posted the link to his free downloadable PDF of the full book. Okay, moving on to feeling connected. That's about building trust, respectful dynamic, and common values. So, and this is my personal experience too, is that innovation and engagement can't thrive in fear. If fear of failure is greater than the benefits of trying and failing and innovating and all of that, you will stop innovating in your company. I don't know if other people have experienced that, but I've had direct experience with that in my professional life. Google's run this whole thing about the importance of psychological safety is sort of in the hierarchy of things, it's the baseline. If people don't feel psychologically and physically safe at work, they will be disconnected no matter what else happens in the organization. And so that Google project study is related to this whole work that Google's doing on this topic. But I love the Chekhov quote also, which is life becomes impossible if you don't have basic trust in people. So that's why, as you say, Antonio, if you can't believe what people are saying is real and you don't think they have other intentions behind their nice words, it's impossible to have a real connection or even a real relationship of any kind. So, in terms of productivity, people commit when they feel empowered and accountable. And that kind of links to the other 2 points, right? Being empowered to make a difference at work will change not only people's willingness to stay, so you have a more productive workforce because they are having a high retention rate, but actually it's just funner to be there. And that's good for everyone. That, just has that virtuous cycle of people feel important in what they're doing, they feel productive in what they do, they feel empowered and engaged. And that creates this beautiful moment. I worked at ABN AMRO Bank for 7 years on a big project. And I would say that was definitely the vibe. It was the best project I ever worked on because we created this fantastic vibe and everyone contributed to that vibe. So the last point is about feeling supported. And I think we've had a few people mention on this call that they are coaching or mentoring or leading teams, helping people. And this is all part of not only creating a supported environment, but being showing others, leading by example, what supported looks like. And so, I think one of the things that Coach Kon mentions is this point about giving constructive feedback. And that's the point made by someone else about when you're not real versus when you're being real. So, feedback is appreciated when it's get done in a helpful and kind way. I think we all agree. But I'd like to know your feedback on that and also recognizing people for their creating that sense of belonging by making them feel like trusted, important members of whatever group you're in, whether that's your family at home or your family at work, I could say. The best projects I have felt like they are my family. I wrote a blog recently about getting to know your manager. Let's say you're a new person and you've got a new manager, and someone wrote in the video I posted, how would I want to be a friend of my manager? And I thought, oh, what does that say? I wonder, does anybody feel that way too? Like, I don't wanna be a friend of my manager, and I guess friend can mean a lot of different things, right? I'm not going out for drinks nightly with that person, and I don't take vacations with that person, but I do consider them someone who is there to support and help and cheer me on and together build something important. Having a good manager, I'm considering them a friend. Anybody else feel that way? This is from Coach Kon's book again. Training people well enough they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't want to. This was a view of mine when I worked in biotech in California. I would often hire people who would do amazing things. And my boss would say, but you're hiring people who are going to get bored with the job once they've automated everything and then they'll leave. And I said, yes, but then we'll have a better system that they've left behind. So they feel they have a legacy that helps everyone. But also, you have a friend in a new company that you can rely on. That person in their new job could become your customer, your supplier, or a valued cohort. And those are valuable things. So even if people do leave at the end, it's still good if you leave on good terms and it's a good relationship. Up with the feeling that you've invested and people left, or you don't invest and people stay. And what does that mean to your business? Your business will just tank, especially in an innovative environment like you're probably in. So I can understand that completely. That's a point made by Coach Kon. The first 2 or 3 chapters of his book, I think one of the first things he talks about the issue of we are exhausted, we are burnt out. The sponge is full. And that's just like we're getting this bombardment and we are just done. We're getting burnt out on every level. Engagement blueprint pillars. And I think it's a great way of understanding how these kind of concepts he's brought in with the 4 engagement components that we talked about, which is being supported, being valued, being connected, and being of value, kind of come into this ecosystem as leaders. Has anyone seen an ecosystem like this? Or maybe you use something like a model in terms of understanding the dimensions of your team and how you try to create the systems and the teamwork, the competencies, maybe through training and coaching and other things, and also the commitment, the sense of purpose, accomplishment, shared values and missions. I heard that mentioned today on our call. How do we create this kind of ecosystem so that we can build stronger teams, stronger organizations? Has anyone ever tried doing something like this, creating sort of a levers of change to figure out how much are my team getting training? Are the systems to help them and support them in place? That could even be performance reviews. Is teamwork and collaboration important to the team? So we're building not just strong competencies, but strong collaboration in our teamwork. And also the commitment, the understanding of the purpose we're all journeying down, the values we use to underline that purpose and mission, and then the commitment to outcomes for that. This is something we were doing during that weekly annual training I told you about at ABN AMRO Bank, but we didn't look at it. I wasn't smart enough to look at it like this kind of system. We just were kind of intuiting these points. One of the examples, and I talk about this on my blog, but I also did it at ABN AMRO Bank back in the beginning of the 2000s, is that when someone built their own competency, so we created different models for the work we were doing there. We were creating a new HR system, which was everything from shared services to employee data, database, payroll systems, everything. Part of our training was doing team building and things like that, but also training on these models. How do we view the difference between the depth of the work and the breadth of the work and all of that? And as people became competent, they were the ones doing the training. And that both gave them value, but also let people hear from different voices. There were different ways of communicating the ideas, and there was ownership in ideas when one group leader was sharing with the whole team how things worked in their group, for instance. And I felt that was actually one of the huge wins. This is where the real magic happened in terms of teaming, building competencies, creating systems for communication, building the sense of team and also the sense of individual importance on the job. Has anybody else experienced something like that? You're right. There's so much variety in the cultures as well, of companies, but also of cultures themselves. Today, we're going to be talking to book author Coach Kon. You can connect with him and follow him on his newsletter because he does post on LinkedIn. And you can also sign up for coaching. He is a professional coach. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me here, Liz.
People joining in, and we've had a really dynamic conversation. And I know that a lot of people are very interested in tapping into the engagement blueprint in more detail later. I've got these questions for you, but one really good question came up earlier. I also want to add to the list. First of all, what inspired you to write the book?
Looking around at the time, this was a couple of years ago. We were coming out of the pandemic, post-pandemic. We were having the great resignation in the United States, where we were observing people leaving in the millions. And that was catching a lot of the headlines. The headlines were all about the massive numbers of people leaving the workforce, sometimes going out on their own, but often not even knowing where they're going. They just wanted to run away from what they perceived as the suppression of their environment. What people weren't noticing, though, is that below those numbers, there was a steady growth in disengagement from people. People were checking out, people's needs were not being met in the workplace. And steadily, that trend was increasing over the years leading up to the pandemic. At the first part of the pandemic, there was a pause because people were concerned about their livelihood, about what was going to happen. But then all of that pause exploded afterwards, and people started leaving in droves, and then we saw the numbers. But a lot of that was based on disengagement, based on workplaces and not meeting the needs of their workers, of their people, and people just checking out and doing the bare minimum.
Wow. That's so you really saw a need for this topic, right?
Very much so, because that's immediately after that, we saw what was called the quiet quitting and everything else. We saw the continuation of those things where people, even though they were staying in their jobs, they were no longer leaving. They were not willing to do more than what was expected because it had become very transactional, the environment. And you could see the difference between the highly engaged companies that were significantly outperforming everybody else that was operating at the base level.
We had a comment just about that today about what happens if you do train people and they leave, and what happens if you don't train people and they stay. And that's kind of aligned with that kind of point you're making. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people have about engagement today?
There is, I think one of the biggest misconceptions about this is engagement is very much like motivation in the sense that it is in a very intrinsic function. It is something that we cannot do for somebody else. All we can do is create the right environment where people's needs are met and people continue to express themselves, to find that passion, to find that excitement about their work, or as we say here in Greece, they're kefi about what they're doing. And they really get excited about things. But we cannot do that for them. All we can do is create the right environment. The other misconception is that there is an element of personal accountability that sometimes gets missed. We have the ability as individuals to take control. And even in a dysfunctional environment, in an almost toxic situation, I've seen leaders and individuals that have carved out a little space for themselves where they can find that passion. And that becomes like a little oasis in an organization. And it can start spreading as people start realizing that they have a role to play in that process.
Yeah, change can begin with you at the end of the day, right?
Correct.
What do you think with terms of the four components of engagement that you talk about in your book? What are companies doing well and people doing well? Which one do we really have a lot of work to do still on?
Well, I think that depending on the industry and the organization, any one of those things could be a strength as much as it is an opportunity. I would say in a lot of the Western societies, especially in the US-based companies, we tend to see a lot of emphasis on the productivity part, on the efficiencies. So companies tend to get the job done well from that perspective. However, it often comes at a cost. And that cost is often the connection that people have between them. Either they set up highly competitive environments that do not really allow for collaboration, or they think in the now, in the moment, in the short term, without looking at the longer term to create a place where people feel valued individually, but also in the long run where they feel supported to learn and grow. So we see a lot of turnover in those organizations where the results are happening, but they're coming at a cost. Highly effective organizations, highly engaged organizations put an equal emphasis on all four of those areas. And they have a way of balancing all of that because these are interrelated needs that we have. You cannot truly isolate one at the expense of the other. They are interrelated, not necessarily in the same way as Maslow created his hierarchy of needs, insofar as if you meet one need, then you graduate and go to the next one and you have to satisfy that. These are ongoing things. I've seen people that operate at a very high level, but they don't feel safe and valued in their organizations. I think we've all been in those places. Toxic environments sometimes operate not in a loud, obnoxious way, but sometimes in a very surface civility, but underneath it's like walking like on eggshells.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. If we only get one message from you today, what would that message be?
It would be that we need to understand that as leaders, project leaders, business leaders, as leaders, we have the ability to influence and shape the environment that we want. We can create a place where people can feel engaged. And once that happens, they will give us their discretionary effort, that commitment that we seek, that equal passion that we seek, while also at the same time achieving higher performance in a very productive way, in a very balanced way. So focus on those areas that you can control. Create the environment where people feel valued, connected, they can feel productive, and they can feel supported to learn and grow. If you make those connections for people, if you establish that piece, then your team will be able to thrive and give you the performance that you're looking for.
I love that. Thank you. I don't know if the rest of everyone on the call knows this, but you're on holiday right now with your family, and I realize you've just stopped by the side of the road. So I'll just leave it with two last questions if I could. Coming back to that question asked by one of our listeners today, how to overcome the past trauma and open up when you feel like you've got shields in place. Do you have any tips for us as just human beings to try to overcome past wounds?
So I would say a couple of things. First of all, there's a general principle that I believe in. Trauma has the ability to teach us, and it has the ability to continue to traumatize us and become that anchor. We can choose to take the lessons from the trauma, to understand what it is that we need to learn from this, and then let the rest go rather than carrying it around with us. Where we as leaders can help others do this, or we can do it for ourselves, is look at the driver of value. Value is first and foremost about creating a safe place, a safe place for people physically, emotionally, psychologically, where people can bring their best. But that takes time. And if you are traumatized, it takes a process of feeling safety over and over again and knowing that that's there. In addition to that, when people feel connected to their peers and don't feel threatened by that, and they find an environment where they are viewed as somebody who can bring their whole self to work with their traumas, with their history, with everything else, that creates, again, an environment of safety where people can feel and be at their best without thinking that they're being judged for those things. All of that contributes to us being able to be effective, but that is a core part of engagement. So those two drivers, especially, I believe have a part to play in overcoming that trauma and being able to get beyond that, because it does take time and it takes repeated proof that, you know what, this environment can be different, or this is a safe place, or you are welcome, you are invited in, and you are included and appreciated for who you are with your history and everything else.
Thank you. I think that's a really powerful message. I'm glad we're going to have a replay of this so people can hear that again, because I think if you have trauma in your life, it takes a lot of listening to those kind of messages to try to break through your own barriers, right?
It takes reassurance over and over again. One time is not enough. One time of somebody telling you, one person being kind to you is not enough. That needs to be over and over and over again in order to be able to get beyond that hardened surface in our heart that is a result of that trauma.
Excellent point. And I think that giving ourselves the empathy we need to know that you might take one step forward and two steps back, because the world is not always a kind place. So
True.
it's a process. Yeah, I have a question about any success stories, and I want to share for everyone here about a personal success story. I had a coaching session with Coach Kon, which I've already mentioned. You do coaching sessions, and people can sign up for that on your LinkedIn page. They can find the right website to go to ask for a coaching session from you. But I got so much value out of that, because just in, I think, 30 minutes or 45 minutes that we spoke, you gave me concrete things to work on to improve both my productivity and my ability to manage what was going to be potential burnout. So I have to say, one of the other takeaways, if you're feeling this kind of situation that you might be in, maybe trauma or maybe overwhelm or maybe burnout, is find a coach. And Coach Kon, you've been a huge help to me in this journey. I have to say, things got a lot better after our coaching session.
Carrying a lot of that around.
Any other success stories you want to share with us as a final question?
Part of the reason why I love the work that we did in there is because it's full of data, it's full of stories, it's full of case studies, and it's not just one industry, it's not just one sector. These are human needs that we have. When we talk about the engagement blueprint, it speaks to human needs. It's not just business needs or employee needs. It's the needs that we all have, that we all share, that it's important for us to address. To me, even when I coach, Liz, you and I talked about it, I don't separate the 9 to 5 person from the rest of you. If you are not in a good place in one part or the other part, you're not happy overall. It doesn't do you any good to be successful at work and then burn out and not be able to give your best to your family, to the people that matter most to you. And likewise, part of the responsibility that we have and the commitment that we have to our loved ones is to be able to be successful professionally in order to provide for them and give them the good examples that we have in the lives that they want. So those things go together. To me, keep in mind, engagement is about more than just the employee needs. It's about people needs. And when you start dealing with people, to me, I'm on a mission to create more human workplaces. That benefits both the employers and the employees. It's not an either or. It can be a win-win and then an additional win for the customers of those companies.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And maybe just a little reminder, I've mentioned your newsletter. People can sign up for your newsletter on LinkedIn. I'll put the link to your LinkedIn account on our book club website. I have just skimmed the surface on the content in here. As I mentioned, it's got business cases, personal experiences from Coach Kon, and a lot of practical models you can follow. So much more content in here than we discussed today. An excellent, excellent book. Thank you for joining Coach Kon, and thank your family for allowing you to stop and share some of your very valuable time with us today. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for carving out some time for us, Liz. And thank you for sharing the message in the book I hope that everybody got something out of it. I post regularly, I share the message, and hopefully between all of us, we can continue to grow our community of leadership that we need to apply, that's healthy, that's balanced, that provides the kind of environment that we all want to be a part of. Let's not wait for anybody else to create it for us. We can do it for ourselves.
Well spoken words, my friend. Thank you again so much. Thank you for joining the book club today. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and see you at the next book club.